TV lawyer shows would have you believe that every trial has wild accusations, surprise witnesses, and dramatic confessions. But the truth is, most court cases are boring. But remember, I said most, not all. Every so often, you get a court case with a defense so unusual, hilarious, or shocking, it makes huge headlines whether it leads to a guilty or innocent verdict. Did you know that PMS has led to more than one crime and has been used in more than one criminal defense? Well, technically it's not PMS. It's a closely related issue called PMDD, or premenstrual dysphoric disorder. It can be so severe that some women attempt to end it all and others consider getting hysterectomies just to escape the nearly intolerable pain and disorientation. Sometimes the PMDD gets so bad that the sufferer acts out violently. In 1981, bartender Sandy Craddock stabbed a coworker, but she said she had no clear memory of the event or her actions. She was a repeat offender of other crimes, but diaries and medical tests showed a pattern of behavior consistent with PMDD issues. She was prescribed probation and progesterone, which kept her mostly out of trouble, except for a few times when she couldn't get her dose, at which point she threw a brick through a window, tried to off herself, and took a knife to a police station. If you have a twin sibling that looks just like you, that might be enough to get away with a crime. It has happened before. In 2003, identical twin brothers were arrested when a key found on them unlocked a house which contained huge amounts of marijuana and opium. Malaysia is notorious for being tough on drug crime, and this particular crime came with the death penalty. However, the judge had a concern. Only the person in possession of the key could definitely be linked to the drugs and therefore sentenced for the crime. They were both arrested together, and because of their appearance, police couldn't be sure which of them was the one in possession of the key at the time of the arrest. The judge wasn't going to sentence two people for a crime that could only be connected to one of them, so she had no choice but to acquit both of the twin brothers rather than risk punishing the wrong one. So if you're a criminal drug dealer, it pays to have someone nearby who looks exactly like you. If you've ever seen The Matrix, you know it's a science fiction fantasy about a fake reality that has humanity fooled. But did you know that it's also the basis for a murder defense? When Ohio resident Tonda Ansley shot her landlord several times in July of 2002, it was more than just anger or a disagreement. Tonda told authorities that she believed her landlord was part of a massive conspiracy to brainwash her and end her life. But it was the details that made it clear what was going on. She described being asleep in bed at night when her landlord and other people in the Matrix drugged people and kidnapped them, then put them back in bed, and they thought that it was just a bad dream. Now that's a scene straight out of the movie, and it led the jury to find Ansley not guilty by reason of insanity. And it's not even the only time the Matrix defense happened, with at least two other people using the defense, and one of them being found not guilty as well. The movie had huge cultural impact, but its legal impact is pretty big too. Does acting crazy really help keep you out of jail? Just ask Vincent Gigante, the boss of the Genovese crime family from the 1980s to 2005. He was nicknamed the Odd Father because of his erratic behavior, peeing in the streets, wandering around in a bathrobe in public, even having full conversations with parking meters. But here's the thing, it was all just an act. In fact, Gigante got out of more than one criminal charge by convincing doctors he was legally insane. The brilliant part of his plan was that he didn't wait until he was charged to act weird. He just did it all the time in his regular life. His plan worked for over 2 decades before he was finally found competent to stand trial and was then convicted. They got him in the end, but he had a good run. Is it possible to be too fat to be guilty of a crime? I don't know, but that didn't stop Edward Yates from using it as his defense in his 2009 trial. He was accused of driving from his home state of Florida all the way up to New Jersey, where he shot his former son-in-law, Paul Dunksek. The defense attorney basically said it was impossible for the 300-pound Yates to drive 21 hours, run up a set of stairs, shoot the victim, and then turn around and drive 21 hours back home. Now, if that sounds cruel and unnecessary, the evidence the lawyer pointed to was Yates' asthma, sleep apnea, and other obesity-related issues. He was also a longtime smoker. Now, it may sound like a convincing argument for a moment, but the jury wasn't buying it. He was found guilty of murder and weapons charges. Any woman can tell you breasts can get you both into and out of a lot of trouble, but did you know that they can also be evidence of your innocence? In 2008, a man accused his bikini model ex-girlfriend of kicking a hole through the door of his house and crawling inside, bringing charges of property destruction against her. The model, Serena Kozakura, maintained her innocence and took the case all the way to Tokyo courts. That's when her attorney arranged a very convincing argument. He held up an object the size of the hole made in the man's door and showed it to the court. He then asked them to compare the size of the hole with the size of Serena's, well, let's call them her work-related assets. The judge agreed. There was no way Serena squeezed herself through a hole of that size, and he dismissed the case. And I'm assuming the ex-boyfriend felt like a real boob. Have you ever heard of the attorney who literally killed himself proving his client's innocence? In 1791, a lawyer named Clement Vallandigham defended a man accused of murder due to a fight that broke out in a bar. But Clement was a good attorney with a sound defense. He claimed the man who was shot during the fight actually did it himself by accident. He theorized that the man shot himself trying to pull out his pistol while kneeling down. He thought the theory was so good he demonstrated the process in the courtroom with what he thought was an empty gun. The problem is, it wasn't empty, and when Clement knelt down to reenact the scene and show how he believed it happened, he accidentally shot himself in the abdomen with the gun that was actually loaded. Clement died a few days later in a hospital from his wounds. However, his proof was so compelling that his client was acquitted and released, so Clement died as a winning lawyer. We've all heard of road rage for when people get angry behind the wheel of a car, but do you know what roid rage is? That's when someone becomes so amped up from the use of steroids that their behavior becomes erratic and dangerous. And that's exactly what defendant Keith Dukes claimed was happening with him in 2015 when he chased down his wife to their neighbor's house. Keith and his attorney claimed that he was on a triple dose of testosterone on the day that he attacked her and ended her life. Their claim was that the changes in his body due to the dosage are what caused his behavior. Their argument was basically the steroids made him do it. While that may or may not be true, it didn't affect the outcome of the case. Keith, who did the horrible deed in front of his children who were hiding in the closet, was sentenced to life in prison. Is it possible to be so rich that you don't have a moral compass and therefore aren't responsible for your crimes? They tested that theory in 2013 when a drunk 16-year-old named Ethan Crouch drove his truck into a crowd of people, injuring 9 of them and leaving 4 of them dead. At his trial, his defense pleaded that he suffered from affluenza, which they described as a lack of awareness of guilt or culpability because of the way his parents raised him. Now, that may sound crazy, but his parents were millionaire business owners who believed the rules only applied to the little people. So it should be no surprise that Ethan, who was responsible for ruining 4 lives and severely damaging dozens of others, was only given mandatory rehab and a decade of probation instead of serving any time for his crimes. And because rich people don't learn lessons, Ethan was caught on social media breaking his probation. So of course he fled the country with help from his mother, hiding out in Mexico until the 2 of them were arrested and transported back to the US. After all of that, he was finally sentenced to 2 years in jail. It's not as much as he might have deserved, but his crimes did finally catch up with him. The justice system has always struggled to balance fairness and compassion, giving people the chance to plead their cases and have their day in court. Sometimes it allows for overlooked and marginalized people to get the justice they deserve, but every once in a while, it becomes a wild platform for some of the strangest defenses ever created. That's it for this episode of No Way That's Legal. If you want more stories of the craziest ways that the law interacts with everyday life, be sure to like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.